By the early 1950s, Gray, nestled in southern Maine, USA, had become a quiet and desirable place to live, known for its low crime rates, job opportunities, and scenic landscape. It was in this seemingly safe environment that one of Maine's darkest tragedies would unfold: the abduction and murder of 12-year-old Daniel Kenneth Wood Jr. Daniel, affectionately known as either Danny or Kenny by his loved ones, was born on October the 30th, 1941 in Westbrook, Maine. He lived in Gray with his parents, Daniel Sr., known to friends and neighbours as Red, and his mother Lillian, who went by Libby, along with his 3 siblings. The Wood family were a typical mid-century American family, raising their children in an era when small towns felt secure and neighbours trusted one another. Kenny himself was a lively, active boy. Tall for his age and weighing approximately 100 pounds, he stood out in photographs with his wire-rimmed glasses and a mischievous smirk that seemed to capture his playful spirit. He enjoyed sports such as baseball and basketball and spent much of his free time fishing with friends in the local streams and ponds. As a 7th grader, he was on the verge of his teenage years, curious, energetic, and eager to experience independence. That summer of 1954, Danny was particularly excited for August. His father, Red, had promised that he could take a job on a nearby farm picking beans. For a boy his age, earning his own spending money represented a step towards maturity. But before he could begin that farm job, another opportunity presented itself, one that seemed harmless, but would instead lead to tragedy. On the afternoon of Thursday, July 22nd, 1954, Danny left his home carrying a fishing pole, telling his mother Libby that he was heading out to spend some time with friends nearby. Libby remembered hearing the slam of a car door outside, unusual for that time of day, but she was busy tending to her younger children and thought little of it. Not long afterward, she received a phone call from Danny. He had stopped at a corner store about 3.5 miles away, a distance he could not have travelled on foot so quickly. He told his mother that a travelling magazine salesman had offered him a job going door to door at 50 cents an hour in Lewiston. He promised he would be home before dark and quickly hung up. That was the last time Danny's family ever heard from him. When Danny failed to return home by dinner time, Red and Libby began contacting friends and relatives, but nobody had seen the boy. They soon reported him missing, and the search began almost immediately. The store owner, Edgar Wilkinson, confirmed Danny had made a phone call from her store, but could add little else, except that he ran up the street afterward, and she did not see him get into a vehicle. Red later realised that at the very time his son left the store, he himself had been at a filling station just 200 feet away. He suspected Danny had avoided him, worried his father would disapprove of the door-to-door job. In the first days after Danny's disappearance, police chased numerous leads. Some turned out to be mistaken identity, such as a reported sighting in Worcester, in Massachusetts. Others were more intriguing. A classmate, Donna Aberley, testified that she saw Danny in a maroon sedan near Dry Mills School. The car was driven by a dark-complexioned, white-haired man, accompanied by a woman and 2 children. Danny leaned out of the window and shouted, "Hi, Donna," before the car drove off toward Little Sebago Lake. Donna noticed the car bore unusual yellow license plates, possibly from Quebec. Other witnesses reported seeing a boy matching Danny's description in Lewiston, Maine, on July the 27th, knocking on doors and selling sewing needles. A Connecticut woman said a boy selling magazines told her he was from New York, though his lack of an accent struck her as odd. These sightings muddied the timeline, leaving investigators uncertain whether Danny had been alive for days after his disappearance, or if the accounts were cases of mistaken identity. Closer to home, police searched the woods behind the Woods' residence and drained a nearby pond where Danny had planned to fish. They found a blood-stained towel and a dress with possible traces of blood, though sadly the results were inconclusive. Then came a strange long-distance call to Libby from a woman in Manhattan. The caller, speaking with a thick accent, claimed Danny was with a cruel man from Birmingham, Alabama, who drove a maroon Studebaker and ran a farm where children were kept. Investigators ultimately dismissed the call as a hoax, but it added to the swirl of confusion. On Saturday, July 31st of 1954, Donald Hoyt and Errol Morse, two fishermen near Auburn, made a horrifying discovery. In the waters of Little Androscoggin River lay the unclothed body of a young boy. His left wrist was tightly knotted with a shoestring, and his body bore the marks of a vicious beating. Soon, authorities confirmed the worst fears. It was Daniel Kenneth Wood Jr. The autopsy revealed that he had not drowned. There was no water in his lungs. Instead, he had been beaten to death with approximately 7 blows to the head, likely with a heavy wooden object, crushing his skull. One blow was so forceful it nearly dislodged one of his eyes. Though the body's condition initially led some to suspect a sexual assault, the medical examiner later found no evidence to support that claim. The body had been in the water for 3 to 5 days, making it impossible to determine the exact time of death. What was clear was that the authorities were dealing with a homicide. Investigators searched the riverbank, finding Danny's Argyle socks and later his glasses in a tree. A broken sledgehammer handle was discovered nearby, though no physical evidence connected it conclusively to the crime. The river itself was clearly not the murder site. His body had been dumped there after he was killed. The Wood family prepared for Danny's funeral on August the 2nd. Friends and relatives crowded into their home, grief hanging heavy in the air. Just before the procession was set to leave, however, a state police officer arrived with some startling news. Attorney General Alexander LaFleur had ordered a second autopsy by a Harvard Medical School pathologist. The funeral, therefore, was abruptly cancelled, prolonging Red, Libby, and his siblings' agony. Eventually, Danny was laid to rest in Gray, Maine, though the circumstances underscored the unsettled nature of the case. In the days following, investigators questioned a number of male individuals. One of the most suspicious encounters involved a 28-year-old from Massachusetts stopped by police in Westport, Maine. He was found driving with 4 teenage boys and explained, rather disturbingly, quote, "I just like to have boys ride around with me." Despite concerns, no charges were brought against him in relation to Danny's murder, and the lead went nowhere. Meanwhile, the investigation broadened. More than 500 people were interviewed and leads poured in from across Maine and beyond, yet none provided the breakthrough police desperately needed. As days turned into weeks, it became clear that the case was hitting a brick wall. Investigators also questioned several travelling salesmen who had been in Maine that summer. Notably, a travelling music salesman was stopped and questioned in Sioux City, Iowa, under suspicion of involvement in Danny's disappearance and murder. Danny had told his mother prior to his disappearance on July 22nd that he was leaving town with a travelling peddler. Despite being questioned, the peddler was never charged nor publicly connected to the case. The man who had been questioned had actually been held in regards to the abduction and murder of an 8-year-old boy, Jimmy Bremer, whose mutilated body was found in a local pasture on September the 29th, 1954, after disappearing on August 31st. Ernest Triplett was later charged and sentenced to life for Jimmy's murder. However, his sentence was later overturned 17 years later, after it came to light Triplett had been under the influence of drugs during his confession. Medical records showed he had been given LSD, stimulants and depressants at a state mental health facility when the confession was obtained. Plymouth County Judge Lawrence McCormick dismissed the original charges, and Triplett now lives on welfare as a quote-unquote small compensation for the wrongful conviction. Bremer's parents later sued the Journal-Tribune newspaper for publishing a front-page photo of the site where Jimmy was found, the explicit image of his mutilated and decomposing body causing the family severe emotional distress and trauma. They believed this publication violated their rights to privacy and were looking for damages of approximately $35,000. Unfortunately, and rather shockingly however, the judge ruled in favour of the media outlet, stating the image was of the public interest. No damages were awarded to the Bremer family. While Maine reeled from Danny Wood's murder, a strikingly similar case unfolded in Montreal, Quebec. On July the 27th of 1954, the same day some witnesses reported seeing Danny alive, a 6-year-old boy named Raymond Trudeau disappeared while walking home. His mutilated body was discovered days later, dismembered and discarded in 2 cardboard boxes on a city street near Montreal Harbour, wrapped in blood-stained newspaper pages. Trudeau had been strangled before being dismembered. He had just turned 6 years old the day prior to his disappearance. Within a month, police arrested Lucien Picard, whose possession of a newspaper clipping matched the wrapping around Raymond's body. Picard confessed, claiming drunkenness clouded his memory, and was eventually executed in February of 1955. The brutality of the Trudeau case, its timing, and Quebec's yellow licence plate led many to speculate that Picard could also have been responsible for Danny Wood's murder. Though no direct evidence ever linked the cases, the similarities remain haunting. Danny's murder shocked not only Red, Libby, and their surviving children, but the entire community of Grey. In a town where crime was virtually unheard of, parents suddenly feared for their children's safety. The brutality of the crime and the fact that it remained unsolved left scars that lasted generations. Despite the passage of decades, the case has never been closed. Maine State Police continue to list Danny Woods' murder as the state's oldest unsolved homicide. Investigators believe someone may still hold information that could help resolve the case, though given the time that has passed since, both witnesses and the likely perpetrator are almost certainly deceased. Still, the case endures as a reminder of how deeply a single crime can wound a community. Red and Libby have long since passed away, as have many who knew Danny. Yet in Grey, his story has not been forgotten. Each time the case resurfaces in local media, it reopens the wound, but also renews the hope that justice might someday be served. Those with any information regarding the death of Daniel Kenneth Wood Jr. are urged to contact Maine State Police's Major Crimes Unit South at 1-800-228-0857.